In case you missed that address a few moments ago, let's flesh out some salient points from the Finance Minister's address with Devan Murugan, who's at the eNCA money desk. So when the Minister says this is not a statist intervention, what is he talking about?
Yeah, well, he's pointed out, Duda, good afternoon, that the fact that, all the money is not going to come from state coffers. And he was put this question, how will you manage your fiscus through all of this? And he said, well, look, let's start with the first thing. Some sectors who've been allocated budgets will not obviously be operating to the full extent under this period. He pointed to the tourism sector, for example. Monies allocated there could be reeled back and then put into the initiatives. He also spoke about the fact that, look, the tax relief hikes, which were largely, or the tax relief rather, which was largely mentioned by the President early in the week, will install or will inject more money into the economy coming out from consumers' pockets, which they will save from. And then he spoke about banks, for example. The banks and their approach to alleviate that suffocation on consumers will also be holding out on some loan repayments, car repayments, for example. So he speaks about this partnership that they are into with the private sector, and not all the strain will be on the fiscus. Nevertheless, he has said that there will be a readjusted budget that will be tabled in Parliament, because inevitably it will affect the numbers at the end of the day.
Mountain out of an anthill. We do pay subscriptions to the International Monetary Fund and to the World Bank.
It was a big issue. I mean, from the time our need for funds to fund the stimulus came to being, you had it all over social media, people saying that, look, we are going to face conditions by these multilaterals, whether it's the IMF or the World Bank, and those conditions might ask for us to make structural adjustments to our economy, and many people saying we don't need that. Well, the Finance Minister essentially saying today that that was an alarmist reaction, because South Africa is only looking for money within the ambit of help that's directed towards the coronavirus outbreak that these institutions offer. He mentioned some figures, by the way, the IMF making a facility available of $4.2 billion, the World Bank much smaller than we thought, just $55 million, and then, of course, the BRICS $1 billion coming from there. But here he is on what he thinks is our entitlement to these facilities.
The issue that seems to be coming top of the pops is whether you're going to approach the IMF, the World Bank, those horrible people in Washington who carry with them stones which they use to break people's bones if you don't pay back and so on. I think, to be honest, we're trying to make a mountain out of an anthill, really. Fact of the matter is that South Africa is a member of the IMF and the World Bank. We pay our subscriptions on a regular basis, and therefore we're entitled to approach those institutions if we so need. In this regard, the IMF and the World Bank have put facilities to support countries which are being affected by this coronavirus. And we too are entitled to approach the IMF and the World Bank for funding. And the IMF has indicated themselves that South Africa is entitled to apply for up to $4.2 billion US dollars in response to this crisis. Now, of course, DG Dondo is in conversation all the time with the IMF and the World Bank people. At the World Bank, it seems for now we could negotiate for a facility of up to maybe between $55 and $60 million. Very small, but we'll negotiate as much as we can in this regard.
On the new economy, Devan, the Finance Minister talking about that we might see a ramping up of the manufacturing sector, where we actually produce our own goods instead of importing goods from the likes of China. He also talked about a new labour market policy that must prioritise South Africans.
Yeah, it's all under this theme that perhaps with this tragedy, with this economic disaster in our hands, a new economy that's perhaps more inclusive could emerge out of this. And you, like you correctly say, he's used examples of a new airline that the Public Enterprises Minister, Praveen Gordhan, spoke about. He spoke about getting the youth intrinsically involved and trained in the construction of homes. What about the ports for the new economy that will be getting active post the COVID crisis, working or getting skilled labor to go in there and work on the ports to expand them and make them more conducive to what we might see post this COVID-19 crisis. So he says it's an opportunity, but that involves structural reform. And just remember, before all of this, that was the big bugbear with this government policy. Just too delayed, too held back on providing that structural reform and taking very necessary changes and sacrifices. I guess the finance minister this afternoon saying that we are at that stage now where you will have to change policy for that reform in order to get this new economy to emerge post this crisis to do.
Okay, so